Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Cluttered Home Podcast. Today, I'm going to be talking about patterns of unhealthy relationships. I feel like this topic is near and dear to me because I've been struggling with this for as long as I can remember, and I think I've just recently come out on the other side of really understanding why I was drawn to unhealthy dynamics to begin with. Some of it having to do with, you know, behaviors and thought patterns that I bought into because I adapted to my environment. I adapted in order to get my needs met of feeling accepted, loved, and needed. And I really wanted to talk about this and share this because I think for the longest time, I was pathologizing myself. Like, maybe I have complex PTSD, maybe I have BPD, maybe I'm depressed, maybe I'm anxious, maybe I'm all of these things. I also found out that I have ADHD, like diagnosed. So there's all of those things in the mix, but I do think that, like, aside from the labels and things that might actually help you understand with the vocabulary that you're now getting from a diagnosis, like that's always helpful to a certain extent. But there are also certain things that we can talk about in a very nebulous way, for a lack of a better word. And I kind of want to share what I've experienced in starting to uncover some of this stuff. Like I'm in the throes of it right now. Like I'm not fully through the process. So I feel like this is probably a topic I'll revisit again and again because it's cluttering up my home. But that's the point of this podcast. I think it's just to declutter the home that is my mind and just share where I'm at with certain things. I feel like we're all a work in progress. Nobody is perfect. Nobody's got it all figured out. And I want to share those learnings because if it can make anyone else feel a little bit less alone, like I'm not where I want to be yet, and that's okay, then great. I would love to share. And so I wanted to talk about my experience healing from a few unhealthy relationships that I was in. I've actually been talking about it like my toxic exes. Like I've got these toxic exes, and I realized also too that that's not really serving me to say that because I think the exes are exes, right? And like also when you date somebody, you're dating them at a certain point in their lives where maybe they're also perpetuating a lot of unhealthy dynamics, but like so was I. And I think I needed to understand that in order for me to heal from these unhealthy dynamics, I have to also take accountability for what I was doing at the time to also feel like I needed those unhealthy dynamics, but also do it with compassion because I also got out of these unhealthy relationships and went through like the probably darkest part of my healing process, which was the shame, the blame, the guilt of like, why did I stay in these relationships for so long when they're just hurting me? So I kind of want to talk about all of that and also like starting to come out on the other side of it. I think I'm feeling like I'm coming out on the other side of it. And also what things in my environment actually helped me kind of come out of that. And yeah, hopefully it helps in any way. So I'll start by talking about where I was when I left these relationships. Like, I don't want to talk too much about the relationships themselves. I'm sure that'll come up as I talk through this. But when I had left both of these relationships, I'll talk about a few in particular. These relationships were all from the lengths of 11 months to almost 3 years. So one ex I dated for almost a year, one I dated for 2, one I dated for almost 3. And all 3 of them perpetuated some really unhealthy dynamics and also left me a little bit more broken and separate from who I truly am each time. So each time I was just kind of like getting further and further away from who I truly was. At the time that I broke this pattern or broke this cycle, I had decided subconsciously, but also a little consciously. I was like, I deserve better than this. Like, I can't do this anymore. This is too painful for me and something needs to change and I need to accept better for myself. Like, I can't accept this any longer. When I left those relationships, the beliefs that I had about myself were that I ruin everything that I touch, that I'm damaged goods, I'm completely broken, I don't know who I am anymore, I don't know how to love, I don't know how to feel loved, I don't even know if what I experienced was love. I don't deserve true love, I don't deserve happiness because of what I've done. To others and what I've let others do to me. No one's gonna wanna deal with this. It's gonna be such a huge burden on them. Just thoughts like that are just like, I'm broken. Like, I'm completely, like, who's gonna want this? Like, who's gonna want this, like, shattered human? I was thinking a little bit with the victim mentality, and I say that very carefully because I'm only saying that looking back, because in the moment, if someone had said, like, dude, that's a victim mentality, I would have been like, okay, so you don't understand me, you don't understand my world, and you don't even want to begin to understand what it's like to be where I'm at right now. But I'm saying that with love, from a sense that, in the sense that, but I say that with love for that previous version of myself, and saying that I think at that moment she couldn't handle more accountability than what she was already holding, which I think was like so much pressure and so much guilt and blame and shame that I was carrying from not having left these relationships earlier, not only hurting myself, but hurting the people around me to watch me go through relationships that were just not healthy for me. And also being delusional enough to, well, let me not say that because I feel like that's negative towards myself. Me also shaming myself for protecting that person's image in that relationship, or the image of that relationship, because it's still what I needed. And I think people in my environment didn't really understand, like my friends and my family who love me and care about me, they didn't really understand why I was with these people. And I think they just wanted to be there for me in any way that they could, because they knew that it was unhealthy from the outside looking in. I feel like it's common that way because your friends and your family, they're not intimate relationships with you. So they're never going to give me something from an intimate perspective that I needed, like all these years, right? So like the only reason I'm getting into this unhealthy dynamic is because I found a maladaptive way to get what I needed in terms of like intimacy, closeness, feeling like loved and appreciated and accepted. And I realized I had gotten myself in these patterns of feeling like a false sense of acceptance and love when really that's not what those relationships were. Like I don't know if they loved me, or if I really can't say. And I think that's what really got to me when I left this relationship. I also started to realize after I got into a healthier relationship, like there was so much that I was bringing in terms of baggage to that relationship that made my self-worth even lower than what it already was. Like if I were single and if I chose to just continue to stay being single and try to find that esteem and that love for myself, which was very hard, and like serial monogamists get a bad rap because I don't think people understand that they have a need for intimacy that is being dealt with in a way that's different than most people. And they will hopefully eventually find that pattern and break it for themselves. But, I feel like there's a lot of judgment around decisions that people make to get back into a relationship after only being broken up with for a few months or whatever. It's like no one's ever really 100% ready to get in a relationship, I don't think, because there are issues that you're going to face and handle when you're in an intimate relationship with another person. Like, that's just how it goes. And if you're ready to take on more of those challenges, then, so be it. And you do you. So I think when I jumped into my healthy relationship after this string of, let's say it was 3, maybe 4 very unhealthy relationships, this one was healthy, but I didn't even know it yet. And I think I was bringing all this baggage because my frame of reference for how I looked at myself, how I looked at love, and how I looked at intimacy was so distorted that I didn't even know what was what. Like, I got into the healthy relationship and I was like, are you like gaslighting me? Are you trying to make me think differently than how I think? And it would be something as simple as like, hey, I think you might be overreacting to this, or hey, I feel like this seems like a lot bigger of a deal than what it initially was. But to me, after having been in a string of unhealthy relationships with unhealthy dynamics, I was like, this is all I've known. So I'm like, no, you are gaslighting me. You are trying to make me feel like I'm crazy. You are trying to make me feel like I'm the problem. And that was so difficult for me. Like, I don't know if people really talk about like getting out of unhealthy relationships and getting into a healthier one where the person is literally trying their hardest to understand you and empathize with you, but you're making it so hard because not on purpose, but you just don't know what's what. And so that's so challenging, especially if you find somebody that you truly want to be with and you want to work through those issues with, because love is just like choosing who you want to like shape a relationship with. I don't think that there are two people who are perfect for each other that just like find each other and boom, it's like the easiest, most seamless thing. I think that you truly just love somebody enough to feel like you want to work through anything that comes your way. And I say that very, very carefully because that's how unhealthy relationships feel. They feel like you just love and care about this person so much that you would be willing to take any like negative experience with them and try to work through it. I think the difference between like an unhealthy dynamic and a healthy dynamic is that with the unhealthy dynamic, it's very much like no matter what comes up, we're working through it. And being in an unhealthy relationship, I'm sure if you've been in one, you know that feeling of like it's almost actively hurting both of you, or it's like taking away from you, but you're pouring everything and more into the relationship and it's still not coming out with better results. But maybe there'll be one happy day in like 10 or in 20 and you feel like it was worth it. You feel like it's starting to get better because you talked about it and you're working through it. But in reality, now having seen the side of a healthy relationship, it's actually kind of counterintuitive, or it feels counterintuitive from an unhealthy relationship because the unhealthy dynamic is codependent, right? So it's like, I'm sad, you're sad. If I'm unhappy, you're unhappy. Now we're both in a fight, we're both unhappy, we're both going to resolve this together until we both feel better. In the healthier dynamic, I think it's kind of like, I see that you're upset and I see that you're hurting and I want to do absolutely anything I can to help you feel better, so long as it doesn't hurt me. Like, I think that being in so many codependent relationships for a long time, I was like, wow, like that's kind of selfish. So you're just gonna like cut it off right there. But it's actually not selfish. It's just a boundary. And I think like, I wish that people talked about that more when you're younger, because I don't know, in the age of like social media and FaceTime and stuff, like your boundaries just get really blurred. Like having a significant other and like expecting them to answer literally at all times is, in my opinion, you're kind of like blurring the boundaries between like your own time and their time. And like I remember some of like my unhealthy relationships in the past, it was like Like, why didn't you FaceTime me as soon as you got home? Like, is something wrong? Are you mad at me because you didn't FaceTime me right when you got home? Or like, why didn't you answer me? I called you like 3 times and you didn't answer. Do you not want to talk to me tonight? Like, or is it because I said this thing earlier and now you're trying to punish me by like not answering my calls? And that's just like a really, really codependent mindset that I didn't realize I had. I think being in a healthy relationship is just knowing you where yourself ends and the other person begins. Because like the unhealthy dynamic feels like a Venn diagram, and it feels like there's this part of like you both that's like fused together. And if anything is like a threat to that part that's fused together, you're both like fighting for your lives to try to resolve it. And like I don't know, especially with the unhealthy dynamic, it's usually the same dynamic or issue coming up again and again and again, but in like different forms. And I saw it coming into like my healthy relationship too, which was really tough for me because I felt like I was the one bringing in this like poison from my past relationships into my new one. And going to therapy helped me realize, I can take accountability for that and also have empathy for the parts of me that I left in the last relationships and have empathy for myself now in the fact that I need to rebuild those parts by myself, not based on the partner that I'm with now. And I think that's hard. That's really hard. People don't really talk about that as much when we talk about unhealthy relationships. It's like, what do you do once you actually get into a healthy relationship and you have to rebuild yourself while you're also building a relationship with a completely new person? Like, that's hard. Another thing that I wanted to talk about was so I've been watching a lot of Dr. Ramani's videos on YouTube about being in a relationship with a narcissist. And I am going to be very careful about saying this because like I don't want to slap a label on somebody. And I also don't want to like diagnose somebody when I'm literally not a clinical psychologist. But it has been helpful to watch her videos to give me language for what I'm feeling because, and honestly, I've been like binge watching them. It's probably not the best way to kind of handle my own feelings, but I think my therapist was telling me that it's probably my own way of trying to validate myself, and I'm just not there yet. I'm not at a point yet where I feel like I can, sit in my own truth and be like, this is how I feel, and I'm going to validate myself. So I'm kind of like looking for other sources to validate how I feel. Some of it being Reddit sometimes, some of it being YouTube. But anyway, Dr. Ramani talks about different power dynamics in relationships. And so relationships with power dynamics are kind of like if one person is playing chess and one person is playing checkers, which Dr. Ramani said. That's not my quote. I think that this is such an interesting concept because whether or not the person is a narcissist, there are power dynamics that show up in relationships that cause or create this unhealthy dynamic because it's kind of establishing that one person is the driver of most of the relationship or a lot of it is focused around them. And it creates like a people pleaser in the other person. So if you're not familiar with the different trauma responses, it's fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. And it's basically the part of your brain that reacts when you're in danger. I think it might be your amygdala, which is like your emotion control center. I could be wrong about that. Don't quote me on that. It happens on a day-to-day basis in your interactions with people as well. It doesn't necessarily mean you need to be like being chased by a bear or something. The fawn response is when I learned that I am a chronic people pleaser. And I realized that I was a chronic people pleaser also because there were different power dynamics in my family. So, when there is this power dynamic, it causes this people pleasing response because in order to maintain the connection you have with this person who might be a little bit more erratic or more unpredictable or have different intense emotions, that they're not dealing with, that they expect you to respond to, you can sometimes build a pattern of people pleasing because in order to maintain that connection, you fawn, meaning that you do whatever it is that they want you to do, or you figure out what in the situation is going to neutralize it or create the peace in the situation, and you just do it automatically. That was such an eye-opening thing for me to learn about myself because for so long I shamed myself for being a people pleaser because I was like, wow, like I have no backbone. I wish I was like a strong person, and I feel like I'm a strong person. I've gone through a lot, but then it would be like these situations where I feel like I would just completely fold and just do what this person wants me to do. Or like I said in the beginning of the episode, I would just try to figure out what it is that they need me to do, and I would just do that and hope that that means that they're going to love me forever. That's just not how that works. I think when you think about like acceptance and love and belonging, those things are survival needs too. Like it's a survival need for you to look to your parents to love you and take care of you. That is a survival need. Like you might not think it's as important as like food or shelter or water, but there are psychological studies on animals and human beings that show that like if you don't have acceptance and love, it threatens your survival and your safety. And so it's very valid. Me going down like a whole rabbit hole just to find a reason to validate myself in needing to be loved is like crazy. But if you're watching this and you resonate with what I'm saying, you do deserve to be loved and you don't need any validation or explanation for that. You deserve that just by existing and being who you are. You deserve that for being who you are. So there's no question about that. And then I was kind of like folding in the kind of cultural pieces. So I feel like a lot of Asian family dynamics or immigrant family dynamics, honestly, any family dynamic, like it doesn't have to be Asian or just immigrants, like there's a lot of them, but particularly in Asian families, the filial piety, which is like basically the understanding that you should respect and cater to your elders no matter what, creates a power dynamic in itself. It's damaging when it's expected of you to just basically subjugate yourself to an adult no matter what. Even if you don't respect what they stand for, even if you've seen them do bad things, even if you've seen them treat other people in a really bad way, just because they're older than you and they're an adult in your family, you are expected to respect them, listen to them, do what they ask of you. I feel like that can be a very unhealthy power dynamic. And it's like a default. Like when you're younger and you meet an adult, this is like a default dynamic that you're stepping into. And so I think as an Asian American child, and we grow up around adults with varying levels of acceptance and assimilation to American culture, like some of them are fully assimilated, some of them are not assimilated at all, and some are in between. But you can see which adults care or like they notice the power dynamic and they don't want you to feel like that, and they'll go out of their way to be like, it's okay, you don't need to do all the traditional stuff, you know. And there are some that lean into it. And I think that's how some of the relationships are. Like sometimes when you meet people, people are like a mirror for you. And I think that on the other side, you're a mirror for them too. So if you're already naturally a people pleaser, or you know how to kind of read people to give them what they want, people on the other side who are constantly looking for what they want and they don't care what you want, they're gonna look at you like a gold mine. Like they're gonna be like, oh wow, this person is so accommodating and cares so much about me and da 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 da. And it can already offset this power dynamic to begin with. And so I think that's where I started to realize me being the people pleaser probably attracted people into my life that took advantage of me. And at the same time, like for the longest time, I thought that the people pleasing was a strength of mine. I was like, I know how to read people. I know how to understand people. I know how to be there for people. I'm really empathetic. And that was my strong suit. And I still think it is, but it was also my Achilles heel because the people that wanted that from me and didn't want anything else about me, including the flaws, the things that I'm not good at, the uglier side of who I am. Not that it's an ugly side, but you know what I mean. Like the dark side of the moon, the mysterious parts and the scary darkness that I experience sometimes. Like not everyone is going to accept that. And I think I just accepted people and opened and welcomed them with open arms without them doing the same for me to begin with. And once I got into this healthy relationship, y'all, like I realized that that's what healthy, secure people do to begin with. They don't even get in the relationship until they know for a fact, like a fact, that this person sees them for who they are, accepts them for their flaws, and would not settle for anything less than that. And they want it all. They just, and I was like, whoa, people do that? Like for me, I was like putting my chips in before I even knew what game I was playing. Like, but then again, also, shaming yourself does not help you. I think for me, for the longest time, I was like, if I shame myself and I guilt myself, or I shame myself and I'm blaming me and making myself feel horrible about doing what I did by staying in those relationships and hurting myself, then I won't do it anymore. Because I'll be like, bad Emily, why'd you do that? You're so dumb. You're so stupid for staying there, you idiot. And like, that just made me feel horrible about myself. What's most important is having validating voices for you, because as you start to like come up out of this dark hole, there might be the tiniest little squeak of a voice that's like, hey, maybe you were just doing what you were able to do in the moment. You were limited. You had a lot of unhealthy dynamics growing up that you weren't conscious of, and you were playing into that, and you needed love and belonging, and you needed somebody to make you feel loved and esteemed, even though they weren't actually doing that. And you thought that's what it was, and you were getting what you needed from those relationships. And even though it didn't turn out the way that you wanted it to, like, what can you learn from this? And if you have the ability to sit there and learn from it, then you're already better off than most people, like you have a chance to make it right for yourself. You have a chance to do better. And I think the more you have people around you who will validate that little voice because they know you for who you are, and they'll remind you like, yes, that is what we're trying to do. That is the Emily we know. That is the person that you can flourish back into or create a new version of yourself. Like, let's lean into that. And having those validating voices is so important. Anyways, I think that's what I'll share for today. Just that, be a little empathetic for yourself. If you've been in a pattern of unhealthy relationships, there's no use in like blaming yourself or blaming other people. I think I went through blaming others and then swung the pendulum over to blaming me. And then now I'm kind of in the middle where I'm like, okay, I understand that we were both perpetuating an unhealthy dynamic. And although I feel like those relationships obviously have done so much damage to me, I still made it through. And, there's a quote that I love, and it's like, maybe I've climbed this mountain to show others that it can be climbed. I totally butchered that. I don't even, that was not as eloquent as when I read it. But it was basically like, I climbed this mountain so I could show others that it can be climbed. Climbed. Is that the right tense? Anyway, it makes me happy to know that talking about this at different points in my life can potentially help other people who are going through something similar or feel like they've been constantly in this unhealthy pattern of relationships. And just know, you're not alone and you're not crazy. And we're all living life for the first time. So if you don't get it right, you are still alive and you still have a chance to do better and to change starting today. And it's really difficult. It's probably going to be one of the most difficult things that you've ever done. But I know you can do it because you've gone through harder. So, anyways, lots of love and thanks for listening or watching today.